And now, the best 60-ish seconds of your week.
I'm back from Brazil, and all the news is cascading down upon us. So we tell you that this is unedited, unscripted. This week I got a script, and this may not be the best 60 seconds. It may turn into the best 60 minutes, so stay tuned. The week, of course, began with Super Bowl 54, and Andy Reid, late of my hometown, Philadelphia, finally gets his Super Bowl ring. More bets placed on this Super Bowl than ever before, and hopefully, if you're of the betting kind, you placed one on the Chiefs because last week we predicted Andy Reid would come from behind and win the big one. So, hope you did that. And the halftime show was all the talk. I'm a Latino. I'll make no editorial comment whatsoever. The ads glossed over. Which one did you like the most? Trump and Bloomberg both got their 30 seconds of fame, and we rolled into the week of political life, where the Iowa caucuses were first up. Now, we're taping this at the end of the week. We're still not really sure who won. This debacle in Iowa was really almost of comic nature. I can hardly wait to see the Saturday Night Live skits and parodies that come out of that. Because here's the party that tells us they can run all of our lives, from the Green New Deal to healthcare to everything else imaginable, including taxes on the sodas you drink. They can't run a simple primary. But there was some underlying news there that was very, very interesting, namely the turnout. We hear all this about the excitement and the energy on the Democratic side of the aisle. Turnout in that primary, which they couldn't seem to count, was down to 170,000, down from almost 100,000 more than that just 8 years ago. Think about that. And so it looks like Bernie Sanders won the popular vote there. Pete Buttigieg probably won the county delegate numbers. You know, it's a very, very protracted and complicated process. The delegates that were elected out of the caucuses are not delegates to the National Convention. They only get 41 of those. You got several hundred elected on Monday night, or presumably elected, because now Tom Perez, the chairman of the Democrat National Committee, is saying, let's have a re-canvass. But at least for right now, it looks like Sanders won the popular vote. Buttigieg won by just a couple of votes, the delegate votes. That could change when they get all the votes in. But whomever emerges as the ultimate winner of that thing, they've lost all the advantage that Iowa typically provides, namely the momentum going into New Hampshire. Here's my prediction. In 4 years, Iowa will no longer lead the nation. The whole country has had it with that. The Democrats themselves are saying this is an embarrassment of unparalleled proportion. Now they roll into New Hampshire. And what's it look like there? Bernie Sanders still in the lead. What's interesting is Joe Biden, who had a miserable night in Iowa, finishing fourth and not that far above fifth, is losing ground. Buttigieg remains constant. What's fascinating there is it looks like Bernie Sanders, the socialist from next door, is picking up the votes that are slipping away from Biden. Biden, is presumed centrist, is not losing them to another centrist candidate, at least at this point. He's losing them to Bernie Sanders. This is going to be fascinating to watch. A guy who hasn't been a Democrat for most of his life, looking like a very, very strong contender for the Democratic nomination this year. And still sitting on the sidelines, Mike Bloomberg, with hundreds of millions of dollars in hand, betting the bankroll on Super Tuesday. Let's see how that strategy works out. But right now, he's looking like he might be in the catbird seat. The next night, we got to the State of the Union message. And ordinarily, there isn't a lot to be remembered out of State of the Union messages. But last year, there was. If you remember Donald Trump's clarion cry that America will never be a socialist country. That rang in a lot of ears for a long time, and I think will continue to. But ordinarily, it's all kind of glossed over the next day. But this year, there was lots to remember. The night began on an interesting note. Nancy Pelosi didn't use the typical high privilege and distinct honor in introducing the President of the United States. Simply said, here's the President. And he began his speech. Now, I worked for Ronald Reagan, the great communicator. And I honestly can't remember a State of the Union message that he gave that was any better than Tuesday night's performance by President Trump. It was a tour de force, going through a litany of really good things happening to the country. The economy, world affairs, a peace deal in the Mideast, trade deals galore, record low unemployment, soaring economic growth, and all sorts of things that are good for the American people. And then he so carefully and skillfully and adroitly used the quote-unquote Lenny Skutnik moments. For those who might not know Lenny Skutnik, he was a guy that Ronald Reagan used back in 1982 to kind of encapsulate the American heroism that was going on. And so what do we get from President Trump? We got a whole list. We got, this Tuskegee Airman, a 100-year-old veteran, one of the last remaining Tuskegee Airmen, promoted by the president to brigadier general. A great story there with his great-grandson who wants to be in the Space Force. Just all sorts of great stories. You went to the baby born at 21 weeks, to the homeless veteran who had turned around his life, to the folks who were mourning the families of Rocky Jones and Kayla Mueller. You had all of these heart-wrenching stories continuing down through the little girl from Philadelphia, my hometown, who got a scholarship from the president, despite the fact that our governor had vetoed the opportunity for her to do that. And, you had the service member coming back and joining his wife and children. And finally, you had Rush Limbaugh, who's been diagnosed with stage 4 cancer, getting the Presidential Member of Freedom. You had members of Congress with tears in their eyes. And I know that an awful lot of folks at home did as well, because frankly, if you had red blood coursing through your veins, you had a little bit of that. And so what did we get at the end? Nancy Pelosi tearing up the speech. Now, I got to tell you, the whole world saw that, and they've seen it repeatedly since, and I can't count, nor do I want to make book on the number of ads that will be used this fall to showcase that terrible moment for her and for her party. How much damage she did in those 31 districts in particular, where solid Trump districts have sent Democrats to Congress to do something. That's going to be replayed. Have to see. That seriously could have cost the Democrats the majority in the House this fall. A lot of water to go over the dam or under the bridge between now and then, but we'll have to see. That's certainly a possibility to be looking forward to. And then on Wednesday, we got the final verdict in the impeachment process, an acquittal of President Trump on both counts. They didn't get anywhere near the 2/3 they needed, the constitutional majority. They didn't even get a simple majority, for crying out loud. And I'm not going to mention a great deal about Mitt Romney, because frankly, the only reason the media is talking about him is that it was the one little sliver of drama in a movie we all knew the end to. So Romney gets his asterisks in history. It'll be a game show question 30 years from now. And that's about it. The rest was all pretty well settled. There was no case. The American people saw that there was none, and so it really was time for the country to move on. I don't try to use these little, ham-handed jokes I hear, but somebody said this was the second time in American history where a president was impeached for publicly humiliating Hillary Clinton. I just had to throw that in there for the sake of your Saturday. But it won't end, and that's already been made manifestly clear by both Schiff and Nadler. They're going to continue, investigate, and guess what they're going to do now? Oh boy, subpoenas. Imagine that, something they could have done back in October or November, but refused and failed to do. Why? Because they had to rush through the impeachment process. They said so. And then when they got impeachment voted in the House, what happened? Oh yeah, Nancy Pelosi held on to the articles for a month. This much we know. The resistance began before President Trump even put his hand on the Bible to take the oath of office. It's continued throughout his administration. There are radical Democrats that will stop at nothing in trying to remove him from office. And guess what? They're going to get their way. On January 20th, 2025, they will finally see Donald Trump exiting the White House. And what's happening in the markets? Up and up and up. Both the Dow and the NASDAQ and all the other major indices flirting with all-time record highs. Closing today, all three of them at record highs. The Dow very, very close to 30,000. The NASDAQ close to 10,000. Despite the sell-off last week because of coronavirus, things are looking good again here in the good old US of A and in our markets. And Tesla, I mentioned them because my son is an Elon Musk groupie, and so I follow them a little bit. Tesla, stock price goes up $100 a share in a single day, falls more than that in the next. I've said it's bigger now in market cap than Ford and GM combined, and in fact its sell-off in one day was roughly their market cap. It's amazing. Watch Tesla. And finally, on a little bit sadder note, the real Spartacus, Kirk Douglas departed us this week at 103 years of age. He certainly was one of the icons of the golden age of the film industry and lived long, long, long into his golden years. A great story of a great man. One little tiny footnote that was of interest to me and some of the rest, and I'll tell you why. He was educated at the Midshipman School at the University of Notre Dame. For those that know Notre Dame football and the storied rivalry between Notre Dame and the United States Naval Academy, and the reason for it will take special interest that Kirk Douglas went to the Midshipman School there. For now, though, may he rest in peace. And that is the best 60 minutes, 60 seconds, 60-ish, whatever, of your week.